Endless were the fruits of Satan, our infernal lord in fire. The unholy bounties bestowed upon us, the horned children, the unrepentant apostles of hell. When first he descended before us upon a chariot of cindered ash, enlightenment befell us, and our souls found power through the light of darkness. In Satan's reviled name, I honor the path that waits ahead, paved with sulfur and fire. Lead me to your nectarous groves in the eternal kingdom of hell. Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Taylor, and on this channel we talk about life and relationships after leaving the church, and we do some commentary on the goings-on in evangelical Christianity. So it's true that most Satanists describe themselves as atheists or non-theists. I myself am a non-theistic Satanist, but did you know that there are theistic Satanists? Theistic Satanists, who are also referred to as traditional Satanists, are those who revere Satan as a supernatural deity. Although modern Satanism is frequently misunderstood by mainstream culture, I believe theistic Satanism is probably the most misinterpreted of all satanic paths. So to hopefully help dispel some of the myths surrounding theistic Satanism, I recently sat down with one such Satanist who goes by Infernal Noctis on social media to ask him about his satanic practice. Can he and I find common ground despite our different perspective on Satanism? Let's find out. Before we dive into the interview though, allow me to take a few minutes to thank the sponsor of today's video, the Paired app. You guys know that Drew and I spend a lot of time on this channel discussing relationships and how we cultivate trust and healthy communication in our own relationship. And the Paired app is a great tool that we've been using for a while now to grow closer together. Paired is a relationship care app that offers daily couples questions, relationship games, quizzes, and exercises, all designed to spark meaningful conversations and deepen intimacy. And what's really cool is that Paired is backed by leading experts and research, so you can rest assured that the app is designed to bring you closer to your partner. Another cool thing is that when you start a quiz, you can't actually see how your partner answered the questions until both of you have responded. It's illuminating to see how your partner responds to different questions because sometimes they'll answer things in ways that you're not expecting, or the questions might not be ones that you even thought to ask in the first place. The Paired app really is a great relationship companion. Okay, so we actually just did a vacation quiz, which was probably good that we do because we both need a vacation really badly. Okay, so the first question was, planning our vacations is a positive experience. I think I put like 4 out of 5 hearts.
Which we'll get into why you would put one less than me.
But you put 5. My partner takes equal responsibility for planning our vacations. I think I put that kind of in the middle. It looks like you put it a little bit lower.
I put it low because I said you take more responsibility in planning our vacations.
Oh, gotcha. Okay. I take equal responsibility for planning our vacations. I put myself as a 5.
Yeah, I disagreed again because you take more responsibility in planning
I think
vacations.
we like came at this like from different angles, I think.
But ultimately
we were trying to
agreed.
Communicate the same thing, yeah. We just like use the heart system a little bit differently. My partner shows me that they're excited about our future vacations. We both agreed very strongly on that. When we reminisce about our vacations, we feel even more connected, and we both definitely agree on that.
Yeah.
So I would definitely say that I take a little bit more of the responsibility when it comes to planning vacations. And I think a big part of that is because I like enjoy planning vacation. I like to do the like kind of logistics of like where we're going to go eat and like what we're going to do. That's kind of fun for me to like plan that all out. But gearing up for vacation, like in the weeks leading up to it, I feel like I'm usually taking more of the responsibility to like get things organized and like clean the house and that kind of thing. Yeah. Which sometimes is a little frustrating.
I am gonna do better. I take this little quiz as an opportunity to try to make things a little bit more equitable as we come up to our upcoming vacation in about a month.
Well, we both really need, like, really badly need a vacation because we've been working, like, nonstop. I don't think we've taken a day off for, like, a while.
6 months.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
not only is the paired app great for new couples in the early stages of their relationship, but it's also great for partners who've been together for longer, like Drew and I, because it helps us connect on a deeper level rather than falling into monotony in our relationship. If you've been looking for a new way to deepen intimacy in your relationship, I highly recommend trying the paired app. If you click the link in the description box below, you can get a 7-day free trial and 25% off paired premium. I think there's really no time like the present to start working on your relationship and improving your communication as a couple. A big thank you to the paired app for partnering with me on this video. Now please join me in giving a warm welcome to Noctis. Noctis, thank you so much for joining me for this conversation. I don't think it's every day that we get like a theistic Satanist and a non-theistic Satanist together, so I'm really excited for this.
Well, thank you so much for having me. Honestly, it's gonna be really exciting. It's gonna be really fun, and like you say, yeah, you never really have this kind of conversation, so it's exciting.
Right, and I found you on TikTok, and honestly, like a lot of the things that you were explaining, I resonated with a lot. So I think that
Nice.
maybe the difference just is the belief part of it. But I like call myself a non-theistic Satanist, but the non-theist means more like I don't think the question of whether or not supernatural entities exist or gods exist really is the most interesting question when it comes to religion. So I kind of just like opt out of it altogether. Sure. I would say like philosophically, I'm more of like an agnostic towards that. But yeah, so like I think that's why I resonated so much with a lot of what you had to say. And I wanted to start out with just kind of talking about your journey to theistic Satanism. And you had mentioned in your TikToks following Anton LaVey and atheistic Satanism for a while before you became theistic. So I wondered if you could kind of share that journey a little bit.
Yeah, so I think it's very similar to what you were saying about kind of this challenge between, I guess, your own belief system and kind of trying to stay away from maybe what it may be a little bit different from yourself, but like staying away from things that you're not so sure of or don't really want to deal with, so to speak. I started off, I was about 19, and so I'm 24 now for reference. I was 19 and I'd always been in the alternative scene, the alternative music scene, and that kind of came hand in hand with the music and the scene itself. A lot of satanic symbols, imagery.
Yeah.
And it's from there that I started to kind of find where I fit. I kind of started researching, and obviously at 19 I was researching, I guess, minimally at that age. And I started off with atheistic Satanism and Anton LaVey and the Church of Satan. And that for a long time sat well. So I was raised partially Catholic Italian, partially sort of atheistic, don't really care kind of vibe.
Yeah.
So religion was always very confusing. I never resonated with God or with Catholicism in any way. I always found it to be something quite unnatural is kind of not the word I'm looking for, but along that route, you know? And so with that, I kind of rebelled against it naturally at a younger age, before 19. I kind of rebelled against that and then stumbled into Satanism. When it came to Anton LaVey, because that was kind of partially your question, right? Sorry if I kind of start to ramble.
No, you're good.
When it came to him, I really, really loved his workings in Satanism. I really did, you know. It did resonate a lot, and I found a lot of myself within that. I grew up very perceptive, kind of, I hate to say naturally spiritual, but that's kind of what I'm going for. I kind of grew up in a way that I was always fascinated by the occult and occultism and spirits of all sorts. And so when I did start involving myself in Satanism, the atheistic side didn't feel quite right. I knew I was there somewhere in Satanism, but I didn't even know what theistic Satanism was for a very long time. So I just felt something deeper than what Anton LaVey was teaching and what the Church of Satan was teaching. And it was only about two to 3 years into my atheistic path that I stumbled into theism, and I did a bit of research. and it was resonating more and more. And because I kind of tend to fall in the esoteric side of theistic
Yeah.
Satanism, that kind of bridge between mysticism and occultism. And after my research, I developed more of a spiritual kind of inclination, even more so than I had before. I then very clumsily practiced my sort of first ritual invocation, and it was from that point I didn't look back, really. It was that
Mm.
powerful to me that I was like, this is it. This is where I'm supposed to be. And it was incredibly comforting and liberating all at once. It was
Yeah.
amazing. And that will always stick with me.
Gotcha. Yeah. That's really, really interesting that you kind of mentioned being more into like the alternative scene and heavy metal
Mm,
music, because that's, I feel like for me, where I really started with Satanism, even though
cool.
like I wouldn't have identified myself that way, but like growing
Mm,
up, because I'm 31 now, but growing up,
okay.
I've always been into heavy metal music. And that's just kind of been my thing and more into like alternative styles.
Yeah.
So coming to Satanism, because I actually identified as an agnostic atheist for a while,
Okay.
but I felt like that didn't really like fit myself or like my personality, versus Satanism really like resonates with me on a deep level and feels like it fits just like my interests in general.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah,
So
like that's kind of, I feel like I'm not sure how, if this is common with a lot of Satanists, but I feel like finding Satanism through music is kind of maybe a typical experience for a lot of
I
people.
think so. I mean, everyone always asks me, your journey to theistic Satanism, because I understand it's a really fascinating thing. You don't hear many theistic Satanists, you don't hear about them. But I feel like my mine is really boring. It's pretty
no, I
standard, I think.
no, I feel like it's actually pretty interesting, probably to a lot of people.
Cool. Well,
Um,
that's good. I think it's so boring.
so one thing that you had mentioned in your TikToks is that you view Satan and your like the deity Satan as an
Mhm.
old god that's kind of separate from the biblical character.
Yeah.
And my question would be like, do you see your path in Satanism as something that's fully separate from Christianity, or
Mm.
do Christian myths play a role in your spiritual life? I'm thinking of the Temple of Set and their connection between Satan
Yeah.
and the Egyptian god Set. I'm wondering if that's like a similar thing for you, or if it's different.
Yeah. I think this is always a really interesting question. I love this question. I love talking about this link. Weirdly, I love talking about the link between, the sort of Christian's interpretation of Satan and the relationship that Satanists have with that. And of course, when I talk about anything today, it is truly on my part. Theistic Satanists vary so broadly that it's actually kind of crazy. There's so many different belief systems. So just from my perspective, um, going to sort of what you first mentioned about me talking about him being an older god, an ancient
Hmm.
being, that's in sort of like a real sort of non-monolithic sense. It's kind of like just to kind of touch on my view of Satan, it's a layer and layers of older spirits. So he's more of a
Okay.
mask or a current or like an interface, I guess you kind of say, like an interface of multitudes or multiple levels. So with that, you come to, like you mentioned, Temple of Set and Enki and Baphomet in its symbolism as well. Um, so it's not bound to one mythology, is kind of what I'm trying to say. And
Okay.
then with hand in hand with that, when it comes to Christianity and it comes to like you talk about the devil and things like that,
Yeah.
I don't walk around classing myself as a devil worshipper, as many people
Hmm.
may assume I am, mainly because my belief system and my path has little to nothing to do with Christianity. The way I view Satan is more of it's a real sort of post-Christian, pre-Christian kind of deal.
Okay.
It's fully separate to me. The only connection I would make between the Christian's version of the devil and Satan, if I had to, would be a misinterpretation. So a bit like when it comes to Set and Enki as well, that's very common with them, is that it's a misinterpretation. It's almost like I
Yeah.
see they use the devil as like a slur to strike fear into something that they shouldn't
Mm.
be fearing. So my personal craft belief system has quite literally nothing to do with Christianity. And I don't really know if that was something that I sought out when I started practicing my craft, or if it's something that I think naturally came to me of what when I was developing my belief system and researching a lot, it wasn't like I was purposefully rebelling against. I mean, I am to an extent, but not on purpose. You
Yeah.
know, it just kind of evolved, and I realized that Christianity, to me, as always, doesn't mean anything. I've never been at all inclined towards Christianity. I've never sought God or even kind of deemed God to be much of a thing, to be honest. You know, I know some do class Christ as a deity and things like this, but for me personally, it's very separate.
Gotcha. Yeah. I think that's maybe a little bit where you and I might like diverge in our thinking, because I actually see my version of Satanism as kind of a branch, or maybe not like a branch or denomination, but like naturally flowing out of Christianity. And I see it
Okay.
as kind of like a reimagining of the figure of the biblical Satan. So like I've told people this before and they're like shocked by this, but I fully think that you can be a Christian Satanist. I don't think that those things have,
Interesting.
yeah, I don't think it like natural, like has to conflict necessarily.
Okay.
Although, you know, most people don't really understand that.
It's like, I'm really interested in that. So what would you kind of, I know it's pretty hard to pinpoint, what would you class a Christian Satanist to be? What would that involve, do you think? Or is it too broad of a stroke to kind of mention that?
You know, because this is only something that I can see hypothetically, and I haven't like actually met anybody that does identify as a Christian and a Satanist at the same time. So I'm not completely sure how other people would view that for themselves. But my guess would be they take inspiration from the figure of Christ and what he represented, while also taking inspiration from things that the devil or Satan represents, which for me, Satan represents a lot of like independence and freedom and like freedom of thought, versus Christ might represent like helping those in need or that kind of thing. So I think I can see people taking inspiration from both of these figures and incorporating that into their spiritual path.
That's a really interesting point. I think from my perspective, it would almost be verging on sort of diabolists kind of ways of living with sort of devil worship and that kind of thing. That's really interesting. I'm going to think on that a little bit. I'm going to mull over that because that's a really interesting concept. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like, I don't call myself a Christian, but I also can see how without Christianity, my view of Satan wouldn't exist. And so in a certain way, maybe you could make the case that my Satanism is a form of Christianity. But yeah, it's kind of hard to explain, I suppose.
No, I think
I
think I'm picking up what you're putting down. Yeah, I'm with you. Yeah, that's really interesting. I think there may be some that kind of feel similarly in the sense of being I guess to them more sort of, you know, without Christianity, what is Satan? I think that is quite a valid question.
Yeah.
Which I understand. I do understand that because I think Christianity is so heavily portrayed in general media, and a lot of people would argue without Christianity, what would we all be? You know, because it's so for over the years it's been with us, you know. And I think a lot of people would kind of bring that up and bring that into the conversation of Satanism. So I do understand from that. So I do kind of see what you're trying to say. I do, yeah.
Yeah, I think for me personally, a lot of it is just informed by the fact that I grew up as a Christian. I actually was a missionary kid. So my parents were Christian missionaries, and I grew up overseas in Indonesia. So like all of my childhood into my early adulthood was, you know, Christianity was kind of everywhere, or something that was like very important to me in my community. And so I think a lot of my like connecting my Satanism to Christianity has to do with the fact that like my conception of Satan is to a certain extent informed by Christianity. It's just I kind of invert the symbolism that a lot of Christians associate with Satan. But also like my satanic practice that I do now is also informed by like witchcraft and Wicca. So you could also make the argument that it's kind of a little witchy. Like I identify as a witch. So
Cool. I mean,
I think,
that's really interesting. We have some similarities there. Obviously, I'm sure we'll touch on it more later, but I too also draw quite a lot of witchcraft into my
yeah.
practice. And yeah, I think if you don't mind me asking, sort of with um, that movement from real sort of in the world of Christianity, like deep into that, and then moving to something that's arguably the complete opposite. What was that journey like? How long did that, what was that, the length of that journey, if you can kind of bullet point it? What was your journey there?
Yeah, so let's see. I think probably in my mid 20s, I started identifying as an agnostic atheist. Prior to that, I was kind of in the like agnostic realm.
Okay.
So my husband, I don't know if you're familiar with the channel Genetically Modified Skeptic,
I've had a little look.
but
I've had a look.
his channel's much bigger than mine. But when he and I married, because we're married, we were both Christian. So we had like a Christian wedding and everything. And
Okay.
then a couple years into our marriage, he ended up kind of deconstructing Christianity and leaving the church altogether. And then shortly after that, I kind of followed suit, because he never like pressured me or like was insistent or anything that I deconvert to. He was fully like in support of me remaining a Christian, and like that was never a conflict in our relationship. But naturally, I think when you have someone that's like so close to you and someone that's your partner, when they start questioning things, that naturally leads you to question
Of
things
course.
also.
Yeah.
So I kind of started questioning, and I was like, I don't know, if Christianity is really resonating with me any longer.
Mm.
Kind of went to the agnostic phase of like, oh, I don't really know. Then started identifying as an atheist for a couple of years, but that label just didn't completely feel like it fit me. And a part of that was being a woman or being someone that's femme presenting. The atheist community, and like especially online, is not super receptive, and
Right.
most atheists are like men. So I felt like that community didn't really fit me, and atheism in general, like I mentioned to you before, like I don't really think the question of whether or not a god or gods exist is really that important, honestly. Like I'm much more
Okay.
interested in like learning about how religion actually affects people's lives, and
Mm.
about their view of things. I think that's a lot more interesting than like
So,
arguing over whether or not God exists.
yeah, so more of like the philosophical kind of side of things, the kind of the more of that, the message than the actual deity or the god that's involved.
Right. Or just, I like with just interviewing you, like I'm a lot more interested in like what does your practice look like, or
Sure, sure, sure.
what meaning does Satan bring to your life, rather than like figuring out necessarily why, you view Satan as a deity, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah,
So
totally.
yeah, I don't know if that answered your question a little
No,
bit,
it
but
did. Yeah, yeah, no. I'm really fascinated because as I mentioned, a lot of people around me, sort of family wise, I mean, a lot of my friends, I'm probably the most sort of involved in spiritual stuff out of everyone. I've got a few, I do have a few born again Christian friends, um, as I mostly have a lot of agnostic and atheistic friends. But my family side, as I mentioned, sort of partially raised Catholic Italian, big time Catholic Italian. Um, Other way is kind of I say atheistic, agnostic, they don't really care. Um, so I think um, I was going somewhere with that. Um, I understand the fascination with more of the personal side of things as opposed to the questioning on what does exist, what doesn't exist. I understand that
yeah.
interest because I've got so many different varying lifestyles and belief systems around me.
Hmm.
I see the fascination there as well.
Yeah, that's the same for me. Like my best friend is a Christian, and we've been friends since like high school. I mean, she's starting to dabble in a little bit more like Catholicism and Catholic
Mm.
thought. But we have very like you could say that we're on like the opposite ends of the spectrum when it comes to spirituality, but still like we're able to have a really, really good relationship, and at the end of the day, like our values, like our core values are
Mm.
still the same. So whether or
Yeah.
not like we identify or resonate with a particular faith, that's not really the most important thing, I think.
Yeah, I think that's a massive misconception, especially when it comes to Satanism, because it is classed as such a kind of taboo or a real sort of
Yeah.
it's a it's a big word people see and they kind of shy away from. And a lot of people do ask me, if I would even if I would be friends with a Christian or Catholic or whatever it may be. It's like, if they're a good person, I'm not looking at my friend criteria is not about their faith. If they're a
Right.
good
Yeah.
person, then I'm going to be, I'm more inclined to be friends with them. I'm not going to define somebody's worth on their belief system unless they give me a reason otherwise to,
Right. Yeah, totally. I guess this kind of like goes into our next question here.
Mm,
Talking about like our practice. I have like a practice for myself that's very informed by witchcraft, and I have a satanic altar and that kind of thing.
nice.
I'm wondering for you, what does your practice look like? Does it involve prayers and rituals or altars? Kind of like, what does that look like for you?
Sure. Yeah, so I'm the same. I have an altar, which is actually it's in the bureau behind me. It's a little fold down
Nice.
thing just behind me there. So it's like I mentioned and like you said, it's quite witchcraft heavy, which is
Yeah.
interesting because before I started practicing, I'd never dabbled in witchcraft at all. I'd had people around me that were witches and pagans in particular, but I had never even thought about it, to be honest. And it all came very naturally with my research and with kind of delving
Mm.
further into the occult, that it came naturally to my craft in the sense that I didn't sit there and go, right, when I'm working with Satan, I'm going to do this. It kind of naturally formed and then brought further of, right, when I'm working with Satan, I will do this. It kind of came to me slowly. So obviously that is and with Satanism as a whole in the theistic side when you come to witchcraft it's very left-hand path centered. I do have antics that would be maybe classed as more right-hand path in the sense of I do prayer work. There are some aspects that are more devotional,
Hmm.
um, but a lot of it is heavily witchcraft ways, so in the sense of I do prayer work. That's daily. That's something that I do frequently. And that once upon a time was from particular prayer books towards for Satanism and for Satan in general. And then slowly as I grew more experienced and kind of evolved in my craft, I wrote them myself. And from that point forward, it grew to offerings, kind of from the beginning, it grew to offerings from prayer, and then I do rituals and evocations fairly frequently. It's either when it comes calling or it's generally on a full moon, generally speaking.
Hmm.
I tend to be quite rigid with when I do them. But at the same time, if it calls to me, like actually just before we started this, I did a very small invocation with saying just to kind of give me a little extra boost because I was a little nervous. Um, so it's a lot about what was I going with that? Yeah, so I do some spell work in it, and it's a lot about working with. It's very equal. There's, I do have the odd devotional aspect to it, but it's really equal, and it's working with, not for or not worshipping. I'm worshipping in the sense of, I want to work with you as opposed to I'm bowing to you, because that's not what Satanism is about.
Yeah.
And so I have an altar that I use very frequently. I journal a lot, and I think a lot of the time also my journaling can also kind of verge on shadow work, so more of the
Mm.
witchcraft again.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, so I do kind of an amalgamation of a lot of things. It's really, really personal to me, and it kind of develops slowly. Um, but the most frequent thing I do is prayer work, and that just kind of keeps me grounded and it keeps me secure and in within my belief system.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, I don't know. I think I tangent then, but I think I kind of answered that.
No, I love that. I love that. I feel like we have a lot of similarities probably
Mm,
with what our
sounds like.
practice looks like. Yeah. I wouldn't say that I do any prayer work. I don't think that I would use that label for it.
Sure.
But maybe more like meditating on the figure of Satan and Lucifer.
Yeah,
The way I think, I kind of see them as embodying like maybe two different aspects of the same figure. So like
sure.
meditating on like freedom or independence or knowledge or that kind of thing.
Mm.
I do that a lot. When I first started, I feel like I was a lot more structured in my practice, where like every morning I would, light or use some incense and like meditate and use tarot and that kind of thing. And I did
Yeah.
that. I kept up with that for several months, but then, life happens and things get
There is.
busy.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I would say now I'm not as like strict about it, but I think in
Mm.
a way I love that, because I think part of Satan is accepting that you have the freedom to not have to like guilt
100%.
yourself over that. So like
100%.
with the way I was brought up, like guilt and shame within Christianity was like everything. So now I've
Mm.
really focused on like not guilting myself over like not being super stringent with it. But when you were
Yeah.
saying how you did a little something before this meeting because you were a little nervous, I
Yeah.
do that a lot too with stuff where like before I travel, I'll usually do something, or before
Mm.
something that's like a big event in my life, I'll usually do a little like spell work kind of thing. But for
Yeah.
me it's very, very influenced by witchcraft, but I it's very personal too. Like
Mm.
it's just something that I've kind of developed for myself, and it's hard to like pinpoint exactly
Definitely. It's
like
it's
what
so
it is I'm
intuitive.
practicing. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
it's
very intuitive.
really personal, and I do find it, like you say, very hard to kind of define to somebody who won't be walking your practice because it's yours. Like you mentioned, meditation, that's a really important one that I forgot to mention as well, is that I'm the same. For me personally, meditation is like one of the key aspects to unlocking my communication with Satan. I use that a lot, and I can't believe I didn't mention that, so it's a good point. I use that a hell of a lot. And that's kind of one of my main points in whether it's invocation or ritual in general, is meditation. And it's really interesting you mentioned about the whole guilt and the shame thing.
Mm.
Um, I experienced something very similar when I first started practicing my theism. It's that ingrained, you don't even know it's there. As someone who I
Yeah.
didn't necessarily go to church all the time, I wasn't that heavily influenced by other religions, but it's that ingrained thing of you must be structured, you must do this, you must obey by that. That blind obedience again. And I had to correct myself and really sort of talk through that in my work with Satan, just about, it doesn't have to be this structured thing. I perform these rituals on certain times of the month purely because of energy. But if it calls, I go to it. If it doesn't,
Yeah.
that's okay.
Yeah, I like that like phrase, like when it calls, because I feel
Mm.
like, I don't necessarily think that Satan is a real deity, but
Yeah.
at the same time I can feel like called to like, oh, now I need to, or I want to like
Yeah.
do something.
And whether that's just
Um
like a little bit of support for an interview online, or whether that's just because you need that comfort or support, 100%. Yeah.
Yeah. And I like the phrase like working with, because that's kind of how
Mm.
I view Satan too. Like I think you mentioned in some of your TikToks, viewing him as more of like a mentor or a teacher. And it's not something that you're bowing down in submission to, but rather working in partnership with. And
100%.
that's very much like how I view it too. We talked a little bit about Satan and Lucifer, and how for me, I see those kind of as the same figure, but maybe
Mm.
embodying two different aspects. Does
Hmm.
Lucifer play a part in your practice at all?
For me, no. To put it simply, no.
Yeah.
Um, there are reasons behind that, and I have nothing against Lucifer. I'm sure Lucifer's great. I So as I kind of touched on briefly earlier about Satan himself being kind of like this mask or this current of
Mm,
whether it's ancient gods or energies or Baphomet, the symbolism there. I do deem Lucifer also and for many to be part of that interface or whatever you want to
okay.
call it. I do see them, not for me, but I do see that connection. I do see how that is made. So I do think that Lucifer for some can be a huge aspect of theistic Satanism. Personally, I don't use Lucifer in my craft.
Okay.
Overall, for my personal craft, I do deem them to be separate deities. I know I've got quite a few Luciferian friends who particularly work with Lucifer. And so for me in my head, because I've never really worked with Lucifer or even sort of channeled that energy, I just don't see Lucifer in my craft. Maybe Lucifer is rocking around somewhere in my craft that I will find out later. But for me personally, no, I don't see kind of I see the connection, I just don't resonate
Yeah.
with the connection. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, totally. I get that. And I
Mm.
think for me, it's growing up within Christianity, Satan and Lucifer are synonymous. Like they are the
Yeah.
same figure. So I think maybe that's kind of what plays into it a little bit. But
Sure.
I definitely see Satan as like rebellion and freedom, and that kind of thing, versus Lucifer is more like knowledge and gnosis and enlightenment,
Yeah.
that kind of aspect of it.
Mm.
But yeah,
And I totally see that in the sense of like um the different currents, if you want to call it currents of Satan, is that there are certain aspects, you know, you've got Set, you've got Enki, you've got
yeah,
Baphomet, you've got Lucifer, you've got all these different elements that you know, so Luciferians, they will focus their craft on one aspect of Satan, or even when you come to like demonotry as well, you've got these different aspects of Satan and demonotry, which I don't personally work that heavily in demonotry at all. But it's this force that is kind of universal across Satanism, theistic Satanism anyway. That it's not, yeah, not monolithic, but there's a lot of aspects in there which I just think it's the most beautiful thing to research because it's so fascinating and it's just so, and not even research it physically, but even practice within my craft and, you know, and evolving in my belief system, because that has varied over time. It's evolved, and I think it will always evolve. And that's what I do love. Part of it is that it's not stagnant. I don't think, right, this is it. I work with Satan, and more comes to fruition, and it develops over time. You know, and I love that.
yeah. Speaking of Baphomet, actually, I didn't even like
Mm.
think to mention that, but I have like artwork of Baphomet that's on my altar too. And I
Nice.
kind of, I guess I never really like thought about this super intensely, but I definitely see Baphomet as like representing its own figure in itself. And for
Hmm.
me, Baphomet is more the representation of needing all types of different people in order to have balance. I even have like a
Mm.
Baphomet, like you can't see it right now, but I have a huge Baphomet tattoo
Oh,
on my
nice.
chest.
Cool.
But yeah,
Mm.
Baphomet is also an important figure for me as well.
Baphomet
Um,
is really interesting. Yeah, I have quite a complex relationship with Baphomet. I mean, Baphomet's right here, you know, and
yeah,
is on my altar as well. But I do see them as the thing is with Baphomet is that I see Baphomet as purely symbolism. I know there are some people that may argue that it's deity work and things like this, which is cool. You know, if that is your belief system, absolutely run with it and go with it. For me personally, it is like you say, it's that balance, and it's purely symbolism for me. But I do also, if you want to kind of try and put Satan in a box and the way that I sort of view Satan kind of thing. And again, I'm reluctant mentioning this, and only in the sense that I think it can be quite heavily um, influenced by Christianity in the sense of having a
mm,
god as this figure looks like this, you know. But
right,
Baphomet resonates with me in the sense of I do see Satan as, if I had to, a sort of horned creature.
right.
If I had to kind of personify this being, um, I would kind of draw a lot from Baphomet, weirdly.
Yeah, no, I get that too. And I think for me also, like I obviously see Satan, Lucifer, Baphomet all as symbols.
Mm.
But out of all of them, Baphomet especially is very symbolic for me. Versus if I were to think about whether, like, just hypothetically, would any of these deities exist, I'm more drawn to saying like Satan or Lucifer would
Mm.
over Baphomet.
Yeah,
That might be kind of like culturally influenced too,
sure,
since
sure.
Baphomet was the deity that like the Knights Templar were
Yeah,
accused of worshiping. So I think it's
yeah.
always kind of been viewed more as like not exactly real.
Yeah, that's the
So
thing is that the symbolism I think is, and like I said, you know, totally cool if people do view Baphomet differently, but for me it is purely symbolism, and you know, because then it brings you to Anton LaVey as well, heavily using Baphomet in his symbolism.
yeah,
But yeah, Baphomet's really interesting, a real hole to fall into with Baphomet.
yeah. So speaking of LaVey, since I've been more publicly out as a Satanist on my channel, especially, I've had some LaVeyan Satanists. I know that they don't necessarily like the term LaVeyan Satanist, but that's kind of how I describe them.
Yeah, me too.
I've had a lot of them, or not a lot. I've had a few come into my comment section and basically say that the only true Satanists are those that belong to the Church of Satan, and everybody else is kind of just like role playing or they're posers, and that I guess the Church of Satan like owns Satanism. So as somebody who did kind of follow the teachings of LaVey for a time, what do you think about their claim that they're the only true Satanists?
And, when you kind of briefly mentioned this to me prior, I was honestly so excited to talk about this because I think it's such an interesting topic. Especially so with Anton LaVey, for myself, this is when I started sort of thinking about this aspect and seeing this kind of common thing of, and even from LaVey himself, this thing of we are the true Satanists and all this and that. That's what drew me away to begin with. It was that thing of, it is the most anti-satanic thing.
Right, that's how I feel too.
And you know what? I actually, I was thinking about this earlier and sort of thinking about what I wanted to talk about when it came to kind of this kind of thing. And I actually grabbed some quotes I wanted to mention. Now, I'm gonna read them just to not get them incorrect. But just because in the sense of sort of, it is a real hypocritical statement. And I think, first of all, how do you define Satanism for a start? On a one thing, that is such a it's everything that Satanists stand against, they are doing by claiming this. And yeah, so what I was going to mention was, so for example, I've got a few quotes if we're talking about LaVey. So in the Satanic Bible, and I think the Book of Lucifer as well, LaVey mentions like there is no need for a Satanist to sell himself. If he is a Satanist, he will act like one, which is one of them, which I thought was interesting. And then off the back of that, he also mentions to be a Satanist means that you do your own thing and don't give a damn about what others think. So with that, firstly, with that being from LaVey, is that, with LaVey, he loves his contradictions. He always did. He loved contradicting himself. That was one of his things, and creating a paradox, which unfortunately just means some stuff doesn't stand in argument when you come to this. And this is when I started to really notice as well LaVey's ego. I mean, obviously, because it is all egocentric, but this was egocentric to the point of detriment to Satanism, and it kind of took away from it because the Church of Satan has now become what it once mocked as well. And just one more quote that I wanted to mention, just that we can kind of discuss as well if you wanted to, is actually from Peter H. Gilmore, the current high priest, which this quote I think it always sticks with me, but I'm going to read to make sure I get it right. But there are no theistic Satanists. Those who believe in the supernatural beings or devils are simply Christians in drag. And I find that a really interesting comment. You're supposed to be opposing religious dogma, and yet they claim superiority. I think that's really interesting and ridiculous.
They claim to be against dogma, but yet they're kind of being dogmatic about what Satanism is. And like you were saying, like, you can't really put like Satanism in a box, and I think it's really going to be individual for every single person. And the idea, because like a lot of Christians, not all of them, but a lot of Christians will kind of do this too, where they're like, this denomination is the only true form of Christianity. Yes. And so I'm like, okay, you're thinking exactly like maybe a more conservative Christian would, but 100%. Just in the opposite way.
Yeah.
Like my thought on it is like, are we really going to gatekeep Satanism? Like, come on. Like that's a little ridiculous. So yeah, I'm glad to hear you say that.
It's insane. And I think, it's all about celebrating self until they hear something that they don't like. And then it's this complete gatekeeping, like you say, and this elitist thing of, you are doing the most anti-satanic thing you can do. And I do think this also kind of, in a way, this makes me think about what you said earlier about Christian Satanists, and not in the sense of this being the same thing, but in the sense of there is a lot of stuff that I think you could be classed within Christ as, even as far as his crucifixion being kind of satanic. The act
Yeah.
of that was kind of satanic. But anyway, I'm going on a tangent. But yes, I think it's ridiculous. I
Yeah.
think Satan never belonged to Church of Satan, and he never did, never will. It's not a belonging. It's, you should be, yeah, you shouldn't be gatekeeping something that isn't meant to be gate kept.
Yeah. And in my opinion, people who are Satanists are those who identify themselves as Satanists. Like
Yeah.
a symbol is just a symbol at the end of the day. I know for you, you see it as a deity, but like
Mm,
symbols can be used in various ways. So for me,
definitely.
it's very much like if you say that you're a Satanist, I'm going to refer to you as a Satanist, and I'm not
Mm,
going to like be the arbiter of who is real and who isn't, because I just don't
mm.
think that like gets us anywhere at the end of the day.
Yeah, yeah, really doesn't. Yeah, 100%.
So talking about like other organizations, maybe I skipped over this question, but are you associated with any organization, or is that very like personal practice for you?
I'm on a solo journey for me. Yeah, I don't
Same.
I don't partake in any of that. Even when I was more on the atheistic side, I never um sort of associate myself with the Satanic Temple or Church of
Yeah.
Satan. It was always kind of a solo trip, regardless. And now even more so, as soon as I got into my theism, it really is. Oh, it's me. That's it. Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't have anything else.
Yeah, that's how I am too, because I do take a lot of inspiration from the Satanic Temple, and
Sure.
I think that they do a lot of good work, but for me,
100%.
because my Satanism is a very personal practice, I don't want to entangle it with any other organization and
Mm.
the baggage and drama that could come with
Yeah,
that. I don't know if that's kind of the same for you.
definitely. Yeah, I think also for me anyway, the way I would look at that is that as soon as you kind of become part of an organization, you are kind of, generally speaking, you are held to a moral code, you are held to something. And I don't think that's very apt in Satanism. I think this is all about liberation of self and individuality and embracing self-empowerment. And I'm all for make it clear that for what the Satanic Temple stands for in their
Hmm.
political and their activism stuff. But yeah, I just think it makes sense to me to have discussions and conversations with Satanists and learn, absolutely. But when it comes to my practice and my craft, I don't feel like it should be between anything else but myself and Satan as a deity that I'm working with.
Right. Yeah. No,
Mm.
totally. I definitely see that, because I love the political stuff, especially that the
Yeah,
Satanic Temple
100%.
does, and I
Yeah.
align with them a lot with that. But
Mm.
it's just like for me, I'm like, it's so personal and it's so important to me that I don't want to take a chance of like even kind of peripherally involving anyone else in it.
Yeah. Yeah,
So
yeah.
speaking about like maybe the more unsavory aspects of Satanism,
Mm.
because there are some groups like ONA, unfortunately,
Sadly.
that has some neo-Nazi ties. So I'm wondering for you, do you feel like Satanism has a neo-Nazi problem, or do you feel like they just kind of represent a more small minority of Satanists?
I think this is, and I was actually kind of glad that you brought this up in a weird kind of way, purely because I think when it comes to Satanism, and especially those that talk about Satanism, whether that's online or in general in the world, if especially if they are Satanists discussing it in a light that's supposed to not appeal, but to the truth, I suppose, as opposed to what Christians may define Satanism to be. Um, I think because you do have to tread very carefully when you talk about Satanism because of its demonization, no pun intended, and because of that aspect of it, and that people are very quick to hate it. Not a lot of people talk about the bad side of it, which
Hmm.
unfortunately exists.
Yeah.
And so when it comes to that, I was glad you kind of brought it up just because I think it needs to be talked about more. I think it is unfortunately it's a very small minority of Satanists that exist. I think, like most organizations or communities or anything, there is, fringe elements and there is bad
Yeah.
actors as a part of it. I think they kind of claim it as like a subculture that they think they can exploit. Um, you know, because of Satanism's view in the media, a Christian heavy media,
Yeah.
it gives them that kind of anchor to make it evil, and
Right.
to kind of push these narratives of really harmful stuff. I think I've got a few points. It's unfortunate because obviously I want to make it clear that the vast majority of Satanists, if not all of them, reject this, reject
Yeah.
any kind of fascism, racism, neo-Nazi, anything, any of that. I think it's ridiculous to associate it because it's almost ironic to blend that with Satanism, and it makes no real philosophical sense, in my opinion.
Mhm.
Um, I think it's also the fact that a lot of us Satanists are in marginalized communities. A lot of us, like myself, are queer, neurodivergent.
Yeah.
It is an almost spiritual refuge, and unfortunately,
Mm.
bad eggs can get in. We don't associate. Obviously, there's going to be absolutely no place for racism, for fascism, for anything like that, or harmful um, things like that in Satanism. There will never be a place for it. And I think, unfortunately, like with the O9A and with even Joy of Satan as well, and it just is so damaging. And it is a very small minority, and it's because it's such a taboo and tiptoed around topic. It can allow for these bad eggs to come in, and it can allow for these eggs to get a bit of a platform, a voice, because
Yeah.
people that see Satanism as a bad thing are going to latch on to these awful, awful people and see it as that's what it is. And that's
Right.
what's really unfortunate because we then, actual Satanists, get completely downtrodden by these ridiculous claims, and because people want to see it as this demonic, evil thing, which it's not, you know? Um,
Yeah.
yeah, it's a shame that it exists.
Yeah. And I think probably for any like subculture or group or philosophical camp, you're going to have, unfortunately, an undercurrent of this type of thinking.
Yeah.
I'm thinking, with punk, like a lot of neo-Nazis
Mm,
were drawn to that too. And I
mm,
think it's with Satanism, it's because to a lot of people, and especially like you were saying, a Christian dominated media, Satanism has this kind of like oppositional vibe about it. And so
yeah.
I think people that have more of these fringe, maybe antisocial positions are also drawn to things like Satanism too because of that.
Mm, yeah.
But I agree. I think it's definitely, from the sense that I get, it's not the majority of Satanists.
Mm,
They're definitely in the minority, and I
definitely.
don't think are super active. Um,
No, I mean, I've not in my time, in my sort of 5 years or so of being in Satanism and in this world, I've not stumbled across it in the sense of seeing people speaking out about it actively pro that, you know. I've come across it in a sense of researching and learning that these things
yeah.
exist. And I just think it's yeah, it is ironic because it's you can't really blend fascism with Satanism because that's
Yeah.
exactly what it stands against. I don't really see
Right?
how they can draw that comparison, but they have somehow.
Yeah. Yeah. Somehow they have. And in
Mm,
my like view of it, I don't want to like fall into the thinking of like trying to label them as not Satanists,
mm,
because, a lot of conservative Christians will kind of do the same thing where there might be unsavory
right.
actors within Christianity, and then other Christians will be like, oh, well, they're not like true Christians and they
Mm,
don't really represent Christianity. I don't want to kind of fall into that type of thinking,
sure.
because I think that kind of just like obfuscates and kind of shifts the blame away from where it really needs to be. So in my
Yeah.
head, like, unfortunately, these people are Satanists. And I think that's just something that like we need to accept the fact that there are kind of
Sure.
this unsavory aspect of Satanism, even if it is kind of a minority,
Yeah, I think
even if they
that's
represent minority.
yeah. It's a really good point for you to make that, and I think I completely understand that, and I do almost agree, but I think this is when my own sort of stubborn belief system kicks in, and I am happy to sit here and be called a hypocrite when I say I don't class them as Satanists. I class them as
Mm,
perhaps misinformed, or I kind of see them as using Satanism as a mask. Maybe saying they're not Satanists is incorrect of me, but I see it as them. They call themselves Satanists. I wouldn't call them Satanists, and I appreciate they are using Satan as a mask. I think I know that is quite hypocritical of me for me to 1 minute ago kind of be talking about, you know, um, there is no way to class Satanism. However, as soon as you start going against exactly what it's about, that's when I start my hypocrisy kind of might creep in the sense of I think they're using it separate to what it is, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think that like I kind of completely understand where you're coming from because I
Mm,
also view it as like that kind of represents everything that Satanism isn't. And
mm,
I think they're drawn to Satanism for the wrong reasons. And I think like the Satanism isn't actually as important to them as being like hateful. I think at the end of the
exactly,
day, that's what they want to be is just hateful. And
exactly.
whatever label they use for that, like the Satanism doesn't really matter. But I
Mm,
think also I'm not going to sit here and be like, they're not real Satanists because I feel
sure.
like that doesn't help us like
It
address
doesn't
the
help. No, it
problem.
helps. It helps us have a moan in true British fashion of me. It helps us moan about it and be like, "Oh, this isn't the way it is," but it does exist, like you say, it's unfortunate that they have been able to kind of do this in Satanism and with anywhere, in anything, anywhere. But I think it's just um, in any way it's ridiculous, whatever
Yeah,
community that comes in, and I think there is just no place for hate or bigotry in Satanism at all,
right.
in my
Yeah,
eyes. Yeah,
totally. Like they'll definitely like I do not want to associate with them. There's
yeah,
really no place for
mm-mm.
them.
No way.
So kind of wrapping up here,
Mm.
what resources do you recommend for people that are interested in learning specifically about the theistic side of Satanism? Because for me, it's like something that you don't see a lot. You hear a lot more
Mm.
about like the atheistic or non-theistic versions of Satanism. Do you have any like resources or places people can go to learn more about it?
Sure. You look at my TikTok. No, I'm
Definitely.
kidding. I'm kidding. There are a few, and I think I have a few points in that, in the sense of very briefly, just that I think Satanism is such a personal belief system to kind of start to venture on and walk that path. And I am resources are really, really helpful, and research is going to be the core thing that aids you in that. What I don't want to do is something that I ended up finding I did when I first got into it, is that I took on these resources that I saw as gospel, and
Mm,
kind of let that mold my own belief system. And then it took me a long time to undo that and actually seek out what it is that I believe with this information I've been provided with. So I can totally give a few. There's a few that come to mind firstly, and it's I'd say for theistic Satanism, it's the Infernal Gospel by Reverend Cain.
okay.
I It gives a very broad look onto theistic Satanism. I think it gives you what you need to start off with. I do think there is a part of it that can be a little bit just to be edgy. I do think there's that
Mm,
there, but I think it's a great place to start. I'd also really recommend checking out Shea Bile, who is doing a lot of work in theistic Satanism. um, he's great, and I think he's got a podcast. He's written a book, and he's all over social media. I would check out him and Reverend Kane's book to start off with. There's a lot also by Marie Ravenswood. Forgive me if that's incorrect. She does a lot of good, cool, and really informative books as well. But I would start there. I'd also, even as a theistic Satanist, I would also say, look into LaVey, look into atheistic and non-theistic Satanism. I think it gives you a broader look into it, and I think the more research, the better in Satanism. Like with anything sort of occult wise, you can never do enough research. And I do think it's not, LaVey's not to be ignored in that. But of course, it's not theistic necessarily. And I think I still, as someone who started off in the atheistic world, I still hold some morals that LaVey taught, and I still, abide by some of those, that sort of moral code and those rights and things like that. But I would say in particular those two. So Shea Belay to look into as a whole. He's got a wonderful brain, and I think the Infernal Gospel by Reverend Cain is also a really good place to start as well for the theistic stuff.
Yeah, and I love your TikTok so much. I love like the aesthetic
Thank
of it, and
you.
like the information's super good. I was so happy because I like have been trying to find information or like talk to theistic Satanists, and it's been really hard. So I was glad to find you.
Oh,
So
honestly, I was so flattered. Like, you're saying about my aesthetic, but your background is just so cool. It's so
well,
professional
actually,
compared to
this
me.
is my husband's.
It's very cool. It's
uh,
very cool. But I was so
he
flattered that
usually
you asked
has
me.
it like blue in the background because his like colors for his channel are blue and red, but he
Nice.
did like purple for me because my colors are
Cool.
purple. So
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, honestly, I was so flattered that you reached out to me, and I'm so happy to have these conversations. So yeah, thank you. I think this was really, really great, and I'm yeah,
yeah.
just flattered. Thank you.
You guys, seriously, please make sure you go and follow Noctis on TikTok and Instagram. He's been creating some really amazing educational content on Satanism that I think that you'll really enjoy. And I think that he offers a different perspective than I do. And I think his perspective is just as valid. I'll have all the links to his social media accounts down in the description for you guys to check out. Thank you guys so much for watching, and a huge thank you to my patrons who help make these videos possible. If you like this video, please be sure to subscribe and ring the bell. If you'd like to follow me on social media, my Instagram is Taylor_the_Antibot. And if you'd like to consider supporting this channel financially, a link to my Patreon will be down in the description, and I'll see you on the next one. Say bye. Burp.